All right, so let's turn to your role now at McDonald's. So when you started in 2014, you were the first chief learning officer at McDonald's. Until that point, there was no person in that role. There were obviously learning and development roles. McDonald's has a great legacy as a learning organization going back to Hamburger University's establishment in the 50s, and so, but the first time there's ever been a CLO was you. So why did the company decide to create that position, and why did you decide to step into it?
I was, somebody asked me, I wasn't at the table for the conversation about the need, but the sense I got was it was a very decentralized organization as a whole, and the tradition in McDonald's had been promote from within, almost through, I'd say until about probably 4 years ago. Almost everyone there had worked there and only worked there forever. So I have people that work for me that have 43, 44 years experience. Some guy retired last year with 54 years with McDonald's, right? He was like, he had to be like employee number 200 or something crazy like that. So there was a shift though that went on in, I'd say 2012, 2013, with the advent of digital technology, an awareness and frankly, a trajectory of sales and customers that was going the wrong way.
It was a tough time for McDonald's.
Yeah, very tough time for McDonald's. The formula needed to change, and new thinking needed to be brought to the table overall in the business. And I think learning was one of those places because the model that we had was promoting people from operations to do the same thing over and over again. And largely what we got was the same formula over and over and over again. So the programs we've been running since the 60s at Hamburger University look largely the same in 2013 as they did in 1967. Heavily instructor-led, kind of piece. So I think what they were looking for was someone who could come in and sort of bring it together on a broader level from a strategy perspective in terms of where we need to be moving from a learning and development perspective. And then secondarily, there was the beginnings of conversations about, does it make sense that we have it fragmented across the organization and essentially are trying to solve the same problem 15 or 20 times in the business.
So you talked about sort of that legacy of people who had been there such a long time. I've heard the term ketchup in your veins. That was what people use that term. They started working at McDonald's as a teenager at a restaurant and then just sort of kept with the company.
Yeah.
So, but you must have had to have some tough conversations when you came in and said, hey, we're going to have to change our approach and our strategy. How did you decide to approach that? Can you talk about how you navigated that challenge?
with individuals like that, I think the conversations about, how do you last 40 years in a business, right, is by being, and in different roles. Many of them, started as crew, and now they're directors or whatever in the organization. They get there by adapting, right, and being open to learning new things. So I really hammered on that fact with people up front about, obviously things are going to change. It's what I was hired to do. So, come with me on the journey, bring all your expertise and history so we don't make the same mistakes again, right? But also, the folks that will thrive and do well are the ones that can adapt and be agile and be open to learning new ways and be curious, honestly, about where we can go or where we can, what's possible against the historical legacy of the organization.
Yeah. I guess a couple questions. One, from my understanding, really leadership and the broader aspects of talent management weren't part of the learning role in McDonald's before you came aboard, but that's changed now. And so
to a degree.
Okay.
Yep.
So that puts you in better touch with executives around business strategy and where things are going when you're, in those conversations with them and we're talking about their development. But how do you stay in touch? How do you stay on top of those shifting sands of the business? Not necessarily L&D, but the business. Yeah. What are some keys, do you think, to that approach?
I think the biggest thing we focus on is making sure that all our work stays aligned to the business strategy. And then, we look at our business strategy. It's called the it's called the Velocity Growth Plan. It's out there. It's public. You can see it if you want. One element of that is what we call experience of the future. And that's where, as you walk in as a consumer, you've got a touchscreen self-order kiosk, or you can mobile order. and you can get it served at your table, those kind of pieces. With that and delivery and those kind of pieces, when you step back and you think about the person working in the restaurant, the fundamental environment is changing pretty dramatically. So starting there and thinking about that individual and whatever role they might be in, and the dimensions of how their job is changing, leads you down different paths. So if it's very operational focused, and now we're actually going to do table service, well, there's an element of hospitality that we never had before, right? From taking someone's order to assisting them at a kiosk and letting them take their time to order it whatever the way they want, that's a completely different set of behaviors. So stepping back and thinking about that in the context of leadership and beyond sort of the operational execution pieces, what's the mindset someone needs to have now is completely different. What's the attitude they need to have? What's the skill set they even need to have is completely changing. So staying aligned to where the business is trying to go strategically really drives the learning and talent agenda, and they're intermingled. You can't miss on the two.
Yeah. You said something interesting when we came out and visited you a couple months ago, and if you don't know, obviously in Chicago, McDonald's is a big employer based out in Oak Brook. You guys are moving downtown in mid 2018, May-ish. You said.
Yep.
And that gives you a chance to sort of start from scratch when you're both in the physical space of your corporate university and how you approach it. But also sort of from a strategic standpoint, it's a fresh start.
Yeah.
One thing that you said was interesting to me was when you create a simulated environment in Hamburger U, the new Hamburger U, it's all going to be, not all, but primarily going to be front of house, customer service oriented.
Yeah.
Whereas traditionally it's been very operationally focused on how do you run the kitchen in the back.
Yeah.
That relates to that business strategy you're talking
Yeah,
about.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, our programs today focus primarily on running a really effective kitchen. But our organizational strategy is shifting to not only that, but also running a really effective sort of dining area where customers might be, or drive-through, or curbside, or delivery, or all those other things. So yeah, moving downtown makes it easy because I don't have to ask for money to redesign it. I get to do it because they're like, what should it look like? So we're adding basically that whole front dining area space where we don't have it today in Oak Brook. Yeah,
That's a rare opportunity to
it
sort of
is.
just build from scratch.
It's fun.
Yeah.
It's scary, but fun. Yeah.